Yaat bene she Josh inishe tochene nishle betahni bashachin tohodglini dashache kinsachini dashanella. Hello, good morning. My name is Josh and I am the on-site manager here at the Hajo Voices of Healing Center. We are located in Borrego Pass, New Mexico at the former historic Borrego Pass trading post. We sit at about a roughly elevation of 7,400 feet and the center is abutted inside a cove against the mesa. Beautiful. When the property came under the Hajon Center, there was 8 existing structures. Those included the trading post, a warehouse, LDS chapel, barn, bunk houses, root cellar, garage, and a hogan located inside of the cove. As it is now, in addition to those, we have a couple additional greenhouses and a chicken coop and some compost toilets. But yeah, let me show you around. Currently, we have just over 5,000 square feet of gardening space devoted strictly to growing food. The majority of the gardens utilize a market garden style approach, which consists of 30-inch wide planting rows and 18-inch pathways. And combining the two together, that's 4 feet. So all of our rows are exactly divisible by 4. In addition to the rows, we also have 6 raised beds ranging in height from 10 inches, 1 foot, and as high as 2 feet. We are a no-till organic gardening site, and we strive to be as sustainable as we can be, utilizing what local resources we have around us here in the Southwest. This includes using dead trees to turn into wood chips, to use as mulch in the gardens or in pathways, or as a carbon source in our composting operation. We even go as far as using discarded sheep wool in our raised beds as a filler for the bottom half that is eventually covered by compost and more soil. Lately in the gardening community, there has been a trend of going no-till because people are starting to understand just how important maintaining the integrity of your soil structure and keeping the microbial life underground alive and healthy, and learning about the relationship these microbes have with the plants themselves. These findings are nothing new. They're actually based on indigenous agricultural techniques that have been practiced for centuries, and the science is just starting to catch up to what we already knew. With that in mind, that has been our approach from the beginning here at the center. Gardens, we're aiming to teach the community how to properly garden in our region of the Southwest here on the Navajo Nation, because what resources people have available to them, it doesn't work here. What they know or see is just the mainstream suburban approach of utilizing synthetic fertilizers and just really depleting your soil. And that's what we want to change, get that mindset out of them and show them the more proper way, the more successful way, the easier way, how to be a great steward of the land. In addition to the food gardens, which is a big L shape on the property, the inside of that L, we are wanting to turn that into a beautiful botanic garden, which right now is where all the ducks and the chickens and the singular goose reside. Usually the run for the birds is just a very long fenced in strip, but after the cold weather took all the crops out, we open up the whole area, because while they're in there, they're going to be scratching, they're going to be eating weed seeds, and they're going to be fertilizing all the area. And by next spring, once everything melts, we're going to push them back out of there, move the ducks elsewhere, divide up the chickens, and they're going to be starting our rotational grazing following the sheep. For the gardens next year, we have a very ambitious goal of expanding our growing space by an additional 20,000 square feet. And that will be happening across the street, where we already starting to prepare the ground by the pump house, and that is going to be strictly all indigenous crops consisting of corn, squash, bean, melons, and maybe even some amaranth. In the meantime, until next year's growing season, our focus is starting to turn to more infrastructure improvement, running utility lines, and the building of a yurt. This is one of 4 yurts that we have. Oh man. And it is gorgeous. The yurts will be used for meetings, ceremonial purposes, and eventually overnight accommodations. In addition to the yurt, we also have a standalone greenhouse and another greenhouse that is joined to the garage. Since it's cold and there's no utilities in here, the greenhouse is being used for storage of yurt stuff. But this greenhouse was possible thanks in part to a grant from the Gallup Walmart store, which paid for all of the supplies to let us build it, which we did, I think in November of last year, and we finished it in December. For now, this greenhouse is just used for starting seeds that we plant in the garden, but eventually when we do get utilities in here, we can start doing year-round growing. Usage of the greenhouse will resume in the middle of March when we start our first seedlings to go into the gardens. And the other greenhouse is just an extension of the other one, but this one will probably get power first. All right, for our last stop, we are gonna go subterranean. Kind of go a bit underground. Woo, into our renovated root cellar. We have 3 root cellars on site. This one, which is a standalone unit, and the other 2 that are connected to the warehouse. A part of the cellar was walled off because we're hoping to eventually turn this into a walk-in refrigerator. Because with the sheep, pigs, chickens, ducks, we're gonna have a lot of meat on our hands, and we need a proper way to store it. Eventually, we also want to wall off this side as well and turn it into another walk-in refrigerator, and that's where we want to store all of our produce that we grow on site. Ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish is true food sovereignty. We want to give people the knowledge and skills on how to take a single seed and turn that into a bountiful harvest for themselves and their family, and to take that harvest, to preserve it, to get them through winter, spring, until next year's growing season, to ultimately give them that choice and to have them take control of their food system and decentralize it from corporate control.
Hello, my name is Justin Kelvin. I'm here at the Hozhou Center. I caretake all the animals around here and also the handyman because of my background in carpentry, welding, mechanics, and anything that needs to be done, that's what I do. The barn structurally, it's stable, but the welding is not very good. So what I did is cut out the old welds and re-welded all the pipe, making it more structurally stable. As for the corrals, what we had to do is eliminate all the weeds and take out all the rotted out railroad ties and replace it with cattle panel and T-posts, making it round. With the troughs, since they were designed for cattle, I had to drop it down low enough to reduce the sheep getting their necks stuck. Right here are the youngest ones, that's why they're separated. And in here, the whole flock stays in here. The rest of them are out in the big pen. There are all the ewes, 2 goats, and a donkey. The donkey is for protection. We do also have a ram. That's going to be our breeder, but he's currently separated. Within a couple of weeks, we will start our breeding process. With the breeding process with our ram, their gestation period is about 5 months, which about early spring, we should expect our lambs. So in here, they stay protected from predators and the elements. As you can see with the straw, this is what their bedding is. With that, they mix it with their manure. Therefore, it gives us living compost with all the microbes, activity in here. It actually stays warm once we mix it up. After 2 weeks of them living in here and breaking everything down, we will then send it across the road to our newly established compost work center. With this manure established at the other side of the road, we will then combine it with a big pile of straw and with nitrogen, also adding water. Once we have our pile established, we will then turn it to aerate it, increasing the temperature if needed. Our goal of a temperature is 140 and never go above 160. So right here are our 3 sows. With them, we have it fenced in, that way they can't get out. Their job is to mow down all this invasive saltweed. What they don't get, we will then rotate our sheep in to help mow it down even more, making a mulch over this and not losing any moisture due to evaporation. Once we have our parking lot fenced off, we will then start with our flock in here, training them to be able to easily move around in what area we need them. So after we train our sheep and our flock here, we will then move them across the street where it's a bigger pasture and do our rotational grazing, eliminating a lot of this invasive stuff. With that, we will then come back and reseed it with natural grasses and replenish as much as we can of this land. When we're doing our rotational grazing, we will then help eliminate or reduce the amount of erosion that is happening around us, because we will put more nutrient grasses in there, therefore absorbing a lot of moisture that is coming and reducing compaction, because sheep are a lot less in weight than they are in cattle. With the cattle, people tend to overgraze because they don't know how much pasture they need.
Lately, weather patterns have been becoming more unpredictable and extreme. For instance, in 2021 and 2022, we had record precipitation during monsoon season and winter here in the Southwest and the Navajo Nation. And in 2023, this year, we had record drought and record heat. It's just went from one extreme to the other, and that started to seem like that's becoming the new reality, the new normal. Last year's monsoon season was the most extreme I've ever seen. The flooding that occurred everywhere in Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, it was really, really something to behold. And these extremes are wreaking havoc on the land. When you have low rainfall and just record heat, it just kills everything. And desertification happens. And then when we do have rainfall, heavy bouts of it, there's nothing to hold the water in place or absorb it into the ground. It just hits the bare earth, compacts it, and then it just runs off. And that's what really contributes to all the flooding that we saw. And it's there where we have gargantuan ambitions to create swales on contour with the land, catchment ponds, use the churro sheep to graze the land to get rid of invasive species, follow them through with reseeding of native grasses, plants, eventual reforestation. That is another huge, lofty goal, and it's going to take many years to achieve. The land has high mesa tops that extend over 8,000 feet elevation. There's small arroyos that eventually form into canyons, and low-lying valleys where when it does rain, that's where all the water runs off. This type of work thus far has been happening in the Cove. Last year, we had 4 very major heavy rain events, and that contributed to mass flooding right down the center of the site. So much water came off the mesa, channeled in the Cove, and it just blew right through and blew through one of our retaining walls. And in order for that to not happen again, we had to take action. So together with a landscape firm called Studio Balcones, based in Austin, Texas, we collaborated, worked together, and we came up with some plans on how to tackle this issue. The first step was surveying the land, walking around on foot in the Cove, on top of the mesa, everywhere, and just visualizing how the flow of water moves through the property. Then came plans for what methods of control we would implement in order to stave off all of this flooding, until eventually you get the plans of what the final product will look like. Our first attempt was the creation of hand-dug swales on contour with the hillside directly south of the market gardens, and where we made a workshop out of it, and we did our summer planting of corn, squash, and melons. You do not want to get rid of that water. You want to keep it on the land to channel to plants, to catch in catchment ponds so it can recharge the aquifer, or harvest it, save it in the barrel, and use it in times of drought. We are confident that the Hozhou Center is going to become one of the model leading examples on how to responsibly manage your land.